Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We've got a little follow-up to yesterday's story about the definition of a woman and how women are being disbarred effectively from standing in, say, boards, on company boards, because the men who wear dresses are claiming to be women and they can get around the legislation that way. And how basically the Scottish Government is trying to cancel women entirely. Now, we have an ongoing court case with the Gender Reform Bill. That's going up to the Appeals Court because it was Section 35 by the UK Government. And as mentioned yesterday, we have this other court case which relates around the definition, effectively the definition of a woman. Now, the court case started yesterday and it was all, the two arguments were put forward. And I was saying how... in yesterday's video, the Scottish Government refused to publish their arguments in advance as to why they were trying to defend it, because they knew that the arguments would be pounced upon and being so weak. Well, we've got a little bit of follow-up here. It's not a big one, but it is a follow-up. But basically what they're saying is that the way the Scottish Government define what a woman is totally unworkable. Because what they're trying to do, of course, is define a woman as being anything other than actually what a woman is. They're trying to define a woman as being a man who wants to be a woman. And of course that's quite wrong, and that's why they're fighting. So we'll take a look at this, see where they are. But you know, it's like they've taken all common sense and thrown it out of the window to try and force this unwanted thing down people's throats. And of course, this outcome really does affect the Section 35 outcome. So they may have to wait on a Section 35 to see what the result of this trial is first. Utterly complex. Anyway, we'll take a look. So Top Court is told that the SNP government's definition of what a woman is totally and utterly unworkable in a crucial women's rights appeal. And of course, because what they're trying to do is redefine what it means to be a woman and effectively remove women as a thing. You're no longer a woman. You're merely a legal definition of a woman that includes men. You are losing your identity, and it's quite wrong. And every woman needs to be up and standing and rejecting this and voting with their feet. Effectively saying, if you're an SNP voter and you're a woman, why would you vote to be cancelled? Why would you vote to have who you are rejected and have your rights taken away from you, have your identity stolen by men? Because that's what you're voting for. The second major court case in as many weeks heard how the SNP government's attempt to include men in the legal definition of women is unworkable. It's utterly unworkable, they say, and it would fail to protect single-sex rights, says a lawyer leading an appeal to a ruling that would allow trans women, men, access to schemes designed to support biological women in workplaces. Scotland's highest court has heard that its 2022 agreement with the SNP government on the matter gives way to an unworkable minefield, and it must be reversed. The judicial review was brought forward by women's rights group For Women Scotland with the support of a crowdfunder and the UK's most prominent critics of gender ideology. Now, this case is absolutely crucial because within this case, this will define in law what a woman is. And the description they're saying is it must be purely biological, not based on the whims and desires of mentally ill men, not, inadequate men sometimes who can't deal with being men, so think life is easier if they just pretend to be a lady. Well, these pretendy Wendies cannot ever be women biologically. And so they have to redefine what it actually means to be a woman. It's the only way they can ever be legally a woman is to change the very definition of what that word is. The guidance was in relation to the Gender Representation on Public Boards Act of 2018. And Judge Lady Haldane ruled in favour of the Scottish Executive, saying sex was not limited to biological or birth sex, when clearly it is from any scientific, factual-based knowledge. She is confusing reality with desire to pretend to be women. She's not dealing with factual information. And no man, no matter what he wears, no matter how many bits he has chopped off or inserted, or no matter how hard he wishes it to be, will ever be a woman. He's just going to be a very sad man in a dress. Look at Eddie Izzard. It's just a sad fat man in a dress. He's never going to be a woman. Anyway, the inner house of the Court of Session heard an appeal from Aidan O'Neill KC for 4 Women Scotland, who led with claims that there was a difference between a person's biological or actual sex and their certified sex as stated in a gender recognition certificate. Yes, because one's real and one's just a piece of paper that has no bearing on reality. Just because you have a piece of paper saying you're a woman doesn't mean you've all of a sudden developed ovaries or a cervix, does it? It won't change your biology. And for example, a man must not be given the blood of a woman who's been pregnant. It could end up killing him. You know, so if this, quote, man all of a sudden is now legally a woman and he's given, but he's a lady, he can have this lady's blood, but she's been pregnant. Yes, it doesn't matter. We have a piece of paper saying he's a lady now, so he won't die. Try that then. Let's see how that works out. Let's see if that piece of paper can somehow change your biological makeup, can change your blood chemistry, can change the whole biochemistry of your entire body, just simply by having a piece of paper. I suspect that may not be the case, in which case, very much a case of having 2 different sexes, don't you think? Anyway, O'Neill told the court that the original ruling was wrong, because of course it is, and that without a change, biological men with a legal sex change could take advantage of single-sex spaces and schemes like this bill in question that seeks to allow for more positive discrimination with the goal of improving sex representation in professional workplaces traditionally dominated by men. So let's say you need to comply with some box-ticking exercise. You need to have 20% of your board being female. And you could look around and every single person on that board is a man. Except for those 3, you know, Susan, Clarice and, you know, Wendy, who are actually men, but they pretend to be women. Well, you can tick your box. There's not a single biological woman there, but you've passed the test. Meanwhile, women aren't getting into those jobs, but pretendy Wendy's are. Anyway, transgender women would also be permitted into our crisis centres and counselling services with no legitimate grounds to exclude them. This could re-traumatise already victimised women. Yeah, you know, you're sitting there, you've taken 2 years to admit what's happened, you finally go to one of these crisis centres, you're sitting there with a group of women, you're talking it through, you're finally opening up, you're getting the catharsis of telling your story of what happens. And then some bloke walks in and goes, "Right, love, how's it going?" How's that possibly going to be good? On the flip side, he said biological men, who have male marker on their GRC, could miss checkups on female anatomy. You know, and it's biological women who pretend to be men would miss out on female anatomy checkups. So, for example, cervical cancer. Because apparently if you're a woman who pretends to be a man, all of a sudden you'll never get cervical cancer because you don't have a cervix anymore because you're a man in law. And that's the problem. It's obviously bonkers and wrong, and that is why something like 99.9% of people disagree with it. It's not a close-run thing. It is massively one-sided, the people who disagree with it. And certainly nobody wants a big biological man going into a dressing room, a changing room, where there may be young girls, whipping his bits out, wobble them in the face, say, "It's all right, girls, it's a lady cock." Anyway, this is an absurdity, said Mr. O'Neill, of what happens when you substitute certified sex for biological sex. He said the SNP's view is that it's an unworkable minefield. He said that the SNP's view is an unworkable minefield, an ambulance chaser's dream, and ultimately gave men more rights than women, because of course it does. In argument, and this is where the Scottish Government are trying to defend it, Ruth Crawford KC for the Scottish Government said there was nothing irrational or absurd about applying the relevant law to persons with a full GRC of the acquired female gender. when it's obviously irrational and absurd and morally and ethically wrong. The very fact that this woman is sitting there saying it's okay for men to go in and do this. I mean, if this woman was sitting there now, this KC was sitting there now, and something terrible happened to her. I'm not saying I want it or it should, or, and she went to a crisis centre, and some bloke went in and sat next to her and said, "Oh, love, Sue, love, great. I'm glad of you. You won that case. I can sit next to you in this our crisis centre now. Let me tell you, I've got an R crisis. Yeah." There's nothing stopping that happening. And what's even worse, there's nothing stopping the perpetrator of that crime deciding that he will now become a woman and sitting next to the victim. He can't be thrown out. That would be a hate crime. That would be discrimination. That would be bigotry. That could happen. And that is terrible. Anyway, she also noted the phrases of actual sex and certified sex used by Mr. O'Neill did not appear in the legislation. Just because they don't appear there doesn't mean they're not perfectly good terms. She added, one starts getting down into various rabbit holes. Well, men... It's not rabbit holes that are the question here, is it, darling? It's not the rabbit holes we're looking about. Lord Justice Clark, Lady Dorian and Lord Malcolm and Lord Pentland heard the cases and they will be deliberating the case before announcing the decision. Now, of course, the decision on this will affect the GRC bill, because if this holds and that there is in law a legal definition of women that does not include men, then that GRC bill automatically fails. It can't do anything else. So they're going to have to hold back on the GRC bill until this bill goes through. If this bill goes through, they then can look at the GRC bill. But it doesn't mean that necessarily the GRC bill will go through, because they're not negating the legitimacy of the GRC. They're negating the legitimacy of the Westminster government to cancel the GRC bill. In both cases, they both rely on this court case. It is going to be fantastically complex. And a journey that we're going to enjoy taking. So be a few weeks, but we'll find out the results, and it'll be spectacular. And I do hope that the women, FWS rather, for Women Scotland, they do win this case, and that the definition of a woman means a biological woman, not a sad man in a dress. Coming up. I suspect most of the people who watch my channel will be very much of in agreement with me that no matter how much they want it, a man can never be a woman. And certainly you don't want men going into places where there's vulnerable women, where there's young girls, or where there's your wife, sister, mother, daughter, that kind of thing. And any man that tries to do it should be rejected. And when I say rejected, I mean rejected forcefully. Make it perfectly clear that they will not be going into that changing room. They will not be getting undressed in front of young girls. And you have to wonder why these people are so desperate to get in there, to undress in front of women and young girls. Because we know. And it's also the government's own figures that show that trans people are 10 times more likely to end up in prison, especially for sex-related crimes. That is their own figures. That is not a point of view. That is facts. Only 6% of normal prisoners are inside for sex offences. 60% of trans prisoners are in for sexually related crimes. And so they do represent, not each and every one of them, but they do represent a threat at a much higher rate. And so, yes, we must keep them away from women and children who are vulnerable, especially very vulnerable women, in DV shelters or in our crisis centres and things like that. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. We'll follow this story. We'll see what the result will be. It'll be a few weeks, as I say, but hopefully it will go the way of common sense if there's any of that left in Scotland. Till then, thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, stay well, and let's hope we win this one. Bye.